Okay, picture this. There is a sleepy ski town in the Swiss Alps where, for 1 week every January, the entire planet's power map gets folded up like a travel brochure and stuffed into one snowy valley. Presidents, prime ministers, central bankers, tech titans, oil bosses, activists, spies probably. And the Swiss government literally turns the place into a fortress. The sky gets restricted, roads get locked down, and thousands of soldiers can be deployed for security. This is not a normal conference. This is the closest thing the modern world has to a pop-up capital of global decision-making. And it happens in Davos. Welcome back to the Wall Street Channel. Today's episode is, so what is Davos anyway? Because people talk about Davos the way they talk about a place in a movie. Like it's not a town, it's a concept. A shadowy summit, a fancy networking party, a globalist cult meeting, a charity vibe, a climate hypocrisy festival, a peace conference, a billionaire ski trip. All of the above, sometimes in the same hallway. And here is the twist. Davos is both extremely real and also extremely mythologized. So today we're doing it properly. The history, the town, the mechanics, the money, the security, the memes, the conspiracy corner, kept fun, kept factual. And then, near the end, we'll talk about Trump's relationship with Davos thinking. Because yes, that tension is part of why Davos matters. And if you like macro, markets, and the hidden plumbing of how the world actually runs, subscribe, hit the bell. Because once you understand Davos, you start seeing the world differently, like you can spot the wiring behind the walls. First, what is Davos literally? Davos is a real place, a small Swiss alpine town, roughly 10,000-ish residents, sitting around 1,500 meters up in the mountains of eastern Switzerland. A ski resort, a winter postcard, snow, pines, trains sliding through valleys, people in puffy jackets trying to look casual while paying Switzerland prices for coffee. But in January, Davos becomes Davos. The World Economic Forum, WEF, holds its annual meeting there, and close to 3,000 high-level participants pour in, plus journalists, activists, staff, and the whole ecosystem that forms around a big global event. Think, hundreds of sessions, leaders from dozens of countries, and a staggering number of private meetings that never make the official schedule. It's like a Davos iceberg. The public panels are the tip, the real mass is underwater. Now, people confuse two things. Davos is the town. The World Economic Forum is the organization. The annual meeting is the event. And the way people talk, Davos becomes shorthand for the global elite itself. Like saying Hollywood when you mean the film industry, or Wall Street when you mean the financial system. Davos is a place and a symbol. Okay, why there? Why that town? Why not Geneva, or Zurich, or New York, or, let's be honest, Dubai? Here's the part most people miss. Davos was famous before WEF, just for a totally different reason. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, Davos became a health resort, especially tied to tuberculosis treatment. Mountain air, sunlight, rest cures, sanatoriums with long balconies where patients literally lay outside for hours. If you've ever seen old photos of Davos hotels with those huge terrace balconies, that wasn't luxury design, that was medicine. This is why Davos has this weird, beautiful architecture of long sun decks and grand old hotels, because it was built for convalescence. And that medical resort identity eventually evolved into a meetings and conferences identity, which is the most Swiss pipeline imaginable. We cured people with air, now we host CEOs with badges. And then, Davos becomes literature. Thomas Mann's novel, The Magic Mountain, is set in a Davos sanatorium culture. He visited Davos because his wife was treated there, and that experience helped inspire one of the most famous big idea novels in European literature. So Davos already had this aura. Altitude, illness, elites, time slowing down, the feeling of being above the world, literally and metaphorically. Now add the World Economic Forum. WEF started in 1971 as the European Management Forum, Klaus Schwab's idea, originally focused on improving management practices and connecting European executives with global business thinking. Then, it expands, it rebrands, it becomes the World Economic Forum, and the annual meeting becomes the flagship gathering. Over decades, it transforms into a broad everything summit. global economy, geopolitics, climate, tech, energy, labor, AI, war, trade, inequality, health. If it's important and complicated, Davos will put it on a panel. And that's why people argue about Davos like it's a political ideology. Because it's not one event. It's a giant convergence point where competing ideologies, interests, and narratives collide under one brand. So what actually happens at Davos? Imagine a conference center, Davos Congress Center, where the official program runs, panels, keynotes, private sessions, curated dialogues. And now imagine the whole town turning into an extension of that building. Hotels become mini embassies, restaurants become negotiation rooms, lobbies become pitch decks, hallways become deal flow. There's the joke. Davos is where people go to solve world problems, between cocktails. And yes, that is cynical, but it's also not entirely wrong, because Davos is built for collisions. Finance meets policy, tech meets regulation, CEOs meet presidents, NGOs meet investors. Here's the key. Davos is as much about the side meetings as it is about the stage. Deals, partnerships, policy alignment, private warnings, back-channel diplomacy, these aren't always signed at Davos, but Davos is often where the first serious conversation happens with everyone in the same zip code. Now let's talk about the part people don't say out loud. Davos runs on access. The annual meeting is invitation-driven and tightly controlled. Companies often participate through WEF memberships and partnership tiers, and the costs can be substantial. Membership, participation fees, and then the real killer, logistics in Switzerland during peak week. It's like buying a ticket to a concert and then discovering the hotel costs more than the ticket. This is where Davos gets its exclusive club reputation. Because it's not just about money, it's about who gets in the room, who gets a badge that opens which doors, who gets into which private dinners, and who can host a house on the promenade where the real action happens. And that brings us to the Davos town takeover problem. For locals, normal people who live in Davos, this week can be brutal. Security operations ramp up, traffic is restricted, streets are blocked, checks multiply, airspace is limited. The Swiss military can deploy in large numbers to support security and logistics, with significant daily presence during the meeting period. Imagine trying to buy groceries in your own town while the planet's leadership is doing geopolitics outside your bakery. Even mundane things get weird. Delivery schedules, parking, train crowds, hotel staff working insane shifts, small businesses making bank for a week, while other residents just want their town back. And there's a psychological weight. For a few days, you don't feel like you live in Davos. You feel like you live inside an international security perimeter. And yes, some locals benefit financially. Some rent out apartments. Some businesses have their best week of the year. Some get seasonal work. But that doesn't cancel the friction, skyrocketing prices, overcrowding, disruption, and the feeling that the town is temporarily leased to the world. Now zoom out. Why does Davos matter? Because Davos is a ritual of global coordination. In a world that is increasingly fragmented, trade wars, sanctions, currency fights, tech blocks, energy blocks, Davos is one of the few remaining places where everyone still shows up to at least talk. And that has two effects. Effect number one, it can reduce uncertainty because leaders can clarify intentions, sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly. Markets love clarity. Effect number two, it becomes a stage for narratives. Who is responsible? Who is innovative? Who is dangerous? Who is cooperating? Who is spoiling? Davos becomes a live battlefield of global storytelling. And in finance, narratives matter, because narratives shape policy expectations, and policy expectations shape yields, and yields shape valuations. Yes, we are going there. But before we go full macro, we need the Davos history highlights, the legend moments. Because Davos didn't become a meme by accident. Over the decades, Davos has hosted memorable diplomatic and political moments, some symbolic, some substantive. It's been used as neutral ground, a place for rivals to appear in the same building without it being a state visit, a place for leaders to test ideas without committing publicly. It's not the UN, it's not a treaty machine, but it's a high-powered alignment machine. And sometimes alignment is the first step toward action. Now let's address the criticisms, because if you don't, your audience won't trust you. Criticism number one, Davos is elitist. It looks like a club of rich people telling the world what to do. That perception is not helped by the price of access, the luxury optics, and the fact that the meeting happens at a ski resort. Criticism number two, Davos is hypocrisy theater. People fly in on private jets to talk about climate targets. That criticism hits hard because the optics are easy: carbon-intensive travel plus climate panels. Criticism number 3, Davos is talk. A lot of panels, a lot of promises, not enough accountability. Critics argue it's more about networking and reputational positioning than measurable outcomes. And then there's criticism number 4, the one that gets spicy: Davos as global governance without elections. This is where the word globalists enters the chat. Globalist is used in different ways. Sometimes it's a neutral descriptor, someone who favors globalization, multilateral institutions, open trade, cross-border coordination. Sometimes it's used as a political insult, a shorthand for elites who are seen as detached from local communities and national interests. And yes, sometimes it's used as a conspiratorial dog whistle. So in this episode, we're using it in the descriptive, political sense: people who prefer global coordination, not secret villains. Okay, Conspiracy Corner. Because if you make a Davos video and skip this, your comment section will riot. You've heard it: New World Order. WEF controls governments. WEF wrote the pandemic. WEF runs the banks. WEF is a shadow government. WEF is the Illuminati with better branding. And then we hit the deep end: lizard people. So here's the grounded reality. Conspiracy claims range from overheated but discussable to pure fantasy. The discussable version is Davos concentrates elite influence and relationship networks, and that can shape policy and corporate behavior in ways the public can't easily see. That's not a lizard. That's sociology. The fantasy version is shape-shifting reptiles in human suits run the planet from a ski resort. No. Fun fact though, one US poll famously found a small percentage, around 4%, saying they believe in reptilian conspiracy ideas. But polling analysts have pointed out something important. When surveys ask absurd questions, some respondents joke, troll, or answer randomly. So those tiny percentages are not evidence that society is collapsing into lizard brain belief. The good news is, the overwhelming majority of people do not believe that stuff. Now, the real reason conspiracy thrives around Davos is actually simple. Secrecy plus power equals suspicion. When meetings are invitation only, when private dinners matter, when who got access is a form of currency, people fill the gap with stories. Some stories are political, some stories are paranoid, and some stories are just internet entertainment. So if you want to be intellectually honest, Davos is not a reptile temple. But Davos is a place where power networks become denser. That's real. And that density affects the world. Now let's make it concrete. What does Davos actually produce? Davos produces 4 main things. 1. Agenda setting. What topics get framed as urgent, solvable, investable, or unavoidable? 2. Coalition building. Governments, NGOs, corporations aligning on initiatives, sometimes genuine, sometimes PR, sometimes both. 3. Signal transmission. Central bankers, finance ministers, CEOs signaling how they see the year ahead. Markets may not trade every quote, but they absorb the tone. 4. Access-based deal flow. Partnerships, acquisitions, philanthropic commitments, private investment conversations. Because Davos is a compression of decision-makers into one place. It's basically LinkedIn, with snow and security checkpoints. Now let's talk about the town again, because your title is, What is Davos anyway? And part of the answer is, it's a normal place that gets temporarily possessed. Outside WEF week, Davos is a winter sports town: skiing, snowboarding, hockey culture, mountain trains, tourists chasing alpine views. It has history, it has its own rhythm, and it has a Swiss kind of calm. Then the annual meeting arrives, and suddenly you have armored vehicles, credentialed zones, journalists trying to ambush leaders outside hotels, and pop-up country houses where governments and companies host side events. And if you're local, the vibe can switch from mountain town to global stage overnight. And this is where the mundane details become the best storytelling. The temporary signage, the extra trains, the security fencing, the pop-up studios, the cold air mixed with the smell of diesel generators, the lobbyists sprinting between hotels like they're late for a flight, and the fact that, yes, there are people doing geopolitics while wearing snow boots. That contrast is Davos. Now, the Trump question. Is his philosophy opposed to Davos? Trump's political brand has historically leaned nationalist populist and skeptical of the kind of multilateral, consensus-driven global coordination that Davos symbolizes. He often frames the world as competitive, deals, leverage, winners and losers, not as a shared governance project. And he has used globalists as a negative label, contrasting it with patriots. But here's the nuance. Being anti-Davos as a narrative does not always mean avoiding Davos as a platform. Davos is useful. It's a microphone aimed at global elites. It's a room full of people you might want to pressure, persuade, or simply dominate the news cycle around. So the relationship can look like this. Trump can oppose Davos ideology while still using Davos strategically, because Davos is where the people he's criticizing are paying attention. If your opponent hosts the biggest party in the world, showing up can be part of your fight. Davos. If you strip away the memes, the outrage, the champagne optics, and the conspiracy fanfiction, Davos is basically this: a high-altitude concentration of power networks run through a conference-format machine. Some of it is genuine dialogue, some of it is PR, some of it is deal-making, some of it is crisis management, and a lot of it is access. That's why Davos keeps showing up in political arguments, because it's not just a meeting, it's a symbol for a worldview, the belief that the world's biggest problems require global coordination, and that the people with the most influence should be in the same room when those problems are discussed, even if that makes everyone else feel locked out. And yes, this is why it attracts the weird rumors, because when you can't see the meeting, you imagine the meeting. But the boring reality is usually the truth. It's panels, negotiations, coalition building, reputation games, and 1,000 quick chats that matter because of who is having them. That's not a sci-fi plot. That's how elite systems behave. Now here's the most Davos thing you can watch in real time, without guessing what's happening behind closed doors. Headlines from Davos can move markets instantly. Case in point, Trump just spoke here in Davos and described a framework for a deal, while backing away from tariff threats tied to Greenland, and markets immediately turned higher. That is Davos as a signal amplifier. A few sentences on a mountain stage, and capital reprices risk. If you want more episodes that decode the power rituals of finance and politics without losing your mind, subscribe to the Wall Street channel and hit the bell. Because Davos is not going away, even if the world is getting less global, and understanding it is basically understanding the language of modern power. So here's my question for you. Is Davos a useful dialogue engine or elite theater with really good lighting? And do you think the world is moving toward more coordination or more fragmentation? Drop it in the comments.